Alex, let's transition over here to the wide receiver position. We've talked about two of these young ascending running backs today. Let's talk about another ascending guy, and it's Justin Jefferson. He's a guy that I've seen overdrafted in a lot of places because just the hype is sky high, but it's for the right reasons. And I think if we break down the situation and what we can expect for Justin Jefferson this year, I still find him as pretty appealing in the late second, early third round, and that just adds to the strategy we're talking about of going running back, and then either tight end or wide receiver, and then going running back again in the third. What do you expect this year for Justin Jefferson?
Here's the thing. I love Justin Jefferson as a player. I think he's going to be one of these guys that's one of the top wide receivers in the NFL for the next decade. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not in on him at his current ADP. Right now, he's going as the wide receiver 8. And last season, in that incredible rookie year, he finished as the wide receiver 6. So he's essentially being drafted close to his perceived ceiling. And that's kind of like the narrative I've had for the past couple of weeks with JJ. But I'll be honest with you, Stef. As I was preparing some notes, as I was preparing some takes on Justin Jefferson, I'm having a little bit of a Myles Gaskin moment. And if you remember on our pod last week with Myles Gaskin, I was like, oh, I'm out on current ADP. But the more I dug into a situation, I'm like, you know what? He's actually a pretty good value. I'm going to start taking more Myles Gaskin. And that's kind of how I feel about JJ. I came into this expecting to be out on him at his ADP. When I hear Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver 8, it just feels a little bit too rich for me. But the more I looked into the numbers, I realized I actually really like JJ for 2021. I think he has an incredibly high floor. And initially I thought, okay, he was wide receiver 6 last season. Everything went right for him. So that's essentially his ceiling. But it's not. I mean, this Vikings team was still only 27th in the NFL in pass attempts last season. Yes, I know they want to run the ball, but if their pass volume goes up at all, those targets for Justin Jefferson are going to go up as well because they essentially funnel all of their volume through two guys, through Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson in the passing game. So when I look at JJ's rookie season, I look at it in kind of two different phases. First is the first 8 games, and second is the last 8 games. And in the first 8 games, he saw 5.5 targets a game. And he did have a couple breakout games in those first 8 weeks as well, which was fantastic to see. That made him a very popular waiver wire target there early in the year. So 5.5 targets a game over the first half. But in the second half, he had over 10 targets per game. And this is on a Vikings team, again, that's 27th in the league in pass attempts. So to me, with Justin Jefferson, if he's seeing 8, 9, 10 targets a game in an offense with a fairly efficient quarterback in Kirk Cousins, I think he really does have upside to return on that wide receiver 8 ADP right now. I think the floor is high because he is going to be an integral piece of their passing offense. And I think the ceiling is actually there as well if we see this Vikings defense struggle again in 2021.
A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson, and to an extent too, DK Metcalf. If you like A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, you have to like Justin Jefferson. Whether you're, upset that he's not this like physical freak 6'2", 220 like Brown and Metcalf, you have to like Justin Jefferson. You just accept reality that J-Jets is good. Because when you look at his situation, it's very similar to A.J. Brown. It's a run-first team where there's a known commodity, highly skilled receiver at number 2 who's aging out. Both of those teams, the Titans and the Vikings, went out and addressed their defense in the offseason. The Vikings still have Anthony Barr and Danielle Hunter. They went nuts and signed 8 defensive free agents, including Patrick Peterson and a bunch of other very strong defensive playmaking veterans that can, honestly, this defense could do a full 180 in 1 year based on the 8 defensive free agents that they signed. So when I look at A.J. Brown, it's the same thing. So to me, it's like if you're high on A.J. Brown, you have to be high on Justin Jefferson. And where we're drafting him in leagues right now is for him to be our wide receiver 1 in redraft this year. Jefferson saw a true alpha target share in year one. He was used in every single area of the field. Defenders could not stop him with the ball in his hands. He was 8th in yards after the catch last year. Was super efficient as well. Was seeing a lot of downfield targets. He was top 5 in yards per out run, yards per target. He was 3rd in receiving yards. We all know about him breaking that receiving yards record that Randy Moss set with over 1,400 yards. He's been great since he stepped on the field. And to your point, Alex, those first 8 games, that told a different story. But you got to remember, he was quiet through week 1 and week 2, but was still seeing like a 70-80% snap share. Week 3, so it literally only took 2 weeks for Jay Jets to get warm to the NFL. Goes bananas against the Titans. Oddly enough, the Titans. 7 receptions for 175 yards and a touchdown, 30.5 fantasy points. He was the biggest waiver rush of all time in many leagues. I could go through all of his 2020 stats. We already know it at this point. It was great. He's raw, and he's going to be relied upon by his offense. You look across from him in the slot, or maybe if you got Jay Jets in the slot, you look over to X. Adam Thielen, who's almost 31, was already out-targeted by Jefferson last year. Yes, he'll still be a threat in the red zone, but at best he stays healthy and plays the Tyler Lockett, Julio Jones, this strong kind of boom-bust wide receiver 2 that we know is good. And he can still play that role, and Jefferson can still have plenty of targets to soak up. Because apparently Irv Smith can't block, so he's not on the field enough to be a threat, which is just absolutely devastating for me. Because I have a lot of shares of Irv Smith. It's absolutely brutal. BC Johnson, Chad Beebe, they got in the 5th round, draft Amir Smith-Marset, who I actually really like in some deep formats. I just don't see a way outside of health with this current roster that Justin Jefferson doesn't repeat at least a 25% target share. And even in a low pass volume offense, that floor gets boosted up so high that even if the efficiency drops, even a minor drop in efficiency can be made up for with that target share. God forbid if Justin Jefferson gets better in year 2, or if Dalvin Cook or Adam Thielen goes down, or he goes from 7 to 9 touchdowns. That more than makes up for any decrease in receiving volume when as a rookie he was already a wide receiver 1 with the low volume last year. The Vikings should be fighting for a playoff spot with the expanded playoff games. They're going to need to rely on Justin Jefferson, plain and simple. So I'm fine with A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, or Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 1 this year when I'm drafting at that 2-3 turn, especially if I know the league that I'm in values their wide receivers. Like if you're seeing Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams go in the first round, you know that some of those wide receiver names are going to start flying. So look, when you're there, when you're actually on the clock, try to grab the last one available from that A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson tier, or go Darren Waller in that range. But lately I've been debating Jay Jets a lot more at that draft spot.
I do have to talk a little bit about some of the risk associated with JJ. And to your point, I think he is in that tier with A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, which you honestly convinced me of before the show and just now. So thank you for rising me on JJ a little bit. But I have to at least address the risk that is out there because, yes, they were bottom part of the league in the pass attempts last season, as we've mentioned several times. But if you do break down the defensive numbers, last year they were 29th in scoring defense, giving up 30 points per game. In 2019, they were 5th in scoring defense, giving up only 19 points per game. So with the upgrades they made on defense, Dalvin Tomlinson, Sheldon Richardson, Patrick Peterson, several other guys, if they even bridge that gap and they're in the mid-20s in terms of points allowed per game, to me, that just signals that they're going to continue to be towards the bottom of the league in pass attempts. There's no reason for me to believe that they're going to come out and suddenly start slinging the ball with Kirk Cousins because this whole offense is blueprinted on running the ball through Dalvin Cook. And that's likely going to be what continues in 2021. So if the volume stays at a similar level, I think Justin Jefferson should see the same target volume that he had as a rookie, or it might even go up a little bit because we did mention the splits between the first half and second half of the season. So maybe he's getting, 8 targets per game on the full season. That's great. I think the target volume there would be plenty for Justin Jefferson to have a good year. But the other concern is the touchdowns from Kirk Cousins. He threw a ridiculous career high 35 touchdowns last season, and I expect that to come down. Kirk Cousins is not a 35 touchdown a season guy. So to me, that's going to continue to be his career high. And even if he comes down to 30 touchdowns, which would still be a fantastic season, it makes me wonder what the upside really is for J-Jets and if he can get to double digits. I certainly think he can, but I think that 7 touchdown range is probably where he's going to live for the next couple of years, as long as they're blueprinted on running the football as often as they do. And lastly, it's just that efficiency piece. So if the volume is similar, if the touchdown upside is similar, the last piece we have to look at is the efficiency. And you highlighted several categories where JJ was just an absolute monster as a rookie. And I think he's a fantastic player. So there's no reason to believe he can't repeat or improve a lot of those statistics in 2021. But I did some research and I found all the players over the last 10 seasons that have had over 100 targets in a season, a 70% catch rate or higher, and 15 yards per catch or higher. So that's 100 targets, a 70-plus catch rate, and 15 yards per catch or higher. In the last 10 years, only 3 guys have done that. It was Justin Jefferson last season, it was Chris Godwin in his 2019 breakout season, and Tyreek Hill back in 2017. So there are only 3 instances where we have seen the efficiency tied with the volume that Justin Jefferson was able to put up last season. So that's a red flag for me, just in the sense that, like, if history tells us anything, it's that it was a truly historical year for J-Jets. And there's no reason to believe that that's not just the player he is. Maybe he will rewrite that record, and 5 years from now, he'll do it another 5 times. But if I was betting, I would bet on the efficiency coming down a little bit, the touchdowns staying the same, and the volume maybe bumping up a little bit, which does put him right in the range where he's being drafted. But I do think there's some risk involved just because of the way that the Vikings run this offense and the low pass volume that goes around there in Minnesota.
Yeah, there's certainly a path to the downside that you can kind of string together, right? Like,
good path for the upside too, though. Good path for the upside as well.
100%. It's, A.J. Brown, the same situation, right? He had that monster year and then it was injuries, right? Or in J-Jet's situation, maybe it's not injury, maybe it's that the defense improves, the pass volume goes down. Now he has number 1 corners posted on him every single game, whereas maybe last year it was kind of breaking up Thielen versus Jefferson because it took him a good, 3 weeks to break out. I see the path of the downside too, but you got to take a shot for a guy that could improve from last year.
And again, with that downside, like, the downside is a wide receiver 2, honestly. Like, if he stays healthy, he's going to be a wide receiver 2 or better. And honestly, if you're looking at that late second round range, if you can get a guy that is almost bust proof, like worst case scenario, he's still going to be usable, and best case scenario, he pushes you over the top for a league winner. Kind of like a CEH, like, he has a high floor, but he also does have that upside at the running back position in that same range. Those are the kind of guys you're looking for late round 2, early round 3.